Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. A brief explanation of the saying of the companion Aboo Dharr Al-Ghifaariyy, my beloved advised me. Aboo Dharr Al-Ghifaariyy raDiyallaahi anhu said, أوصاني خليلي بخصال من الخير، أوصاني بحب المساكين والدنو منهم، وأوصاني أن أنظر إلى من هو دوني ولا أنظر إلى من هو فوقي، وأوصاني أن أصل رحمي وإن أدبرت، وأوصاني أن أقول الحق ولو كان مرا، وأن أكثر من قول لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. رواه البيهقي. My Khaleel, that is my beloved companion, meaning the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, advised me with traits of goodness. He advised me with loving the poor and being close to them. And he advised me to look at who is below me in the worldly matters, and not to look at who is above me. And he advised me to keep ties with my relatives, even if they severed them. And he advised me to say the truth, even if it was bitter. And to say, Laa Hawla walaa Quwwata illaa Billaah a lot. This hadith is narrated by البيهقي. So in explaining it, Aboo Dharr said, my Khaleel advised me with traits of goodness. He advised me with loving the poor and being close to them. The explanation is, out of the great compassion and mercy that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had for the believers, is that if he did not see one of his companions for a period of time, he would ask about him to see if he is okay or if he is in need, to the extent that one time he asked about a poor Muslim man who was not known to many, and the Prophet was told that he had passed away. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked them to show him where his grave was and where he was buried, and so he was directed to it, and he prayed for this poor Muslim. To this extent, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam loved the poor people, and he cared for them. And this was not except a poor man who was a stranger, a gharib, someone who was not known to many people. Aboo Dharr, may Allah raise his rank, said, and he advised me to look at who is below me and not to look at who is above me. This means in the worldly matters, that is, for one to not look at the matters of the rich folk and compare one's situation to theirs. Rather, one should look at the circumstance of the poor and those who have less than oneself. If one was to look at the wealthy, then he or she would look down at the endowment that Allah Ta'ala endowed them with, and they would not appreciate it. Rather, they would see it as little. Because of that, he or she would end up having greed in their heart, and so they would not thank Allah Ta'ala for the endowments, since their thoughts have been invested into the money and situations of the wealthy people. One in this situation would think, how can I become like those people? And this leads him or her to become very occupied with the worldly matters until he or she starts gathering this money through forbidden means and they don't care. Or they go down a path seeking the dunya in a way that is not accepted to Allah, and they wouldn't care. Their only worry is accumulation of wealth or status or some other worldly pleasure. As for if one looks at someone that is below them, that is poorer than they are, then he or she would thank Allah more, and this thanking will support them to be generous with those who are more in need than they are. فقد ورد في الحديث الصحيح أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: سبق درهم 100,000 درهم. قيل: وكيف ذلك يا رسول الله؟ فقال: رجل له درهمان، أي لا يملك غيرهما، فتصدق بأحدهما، ورجل تصدق ب100,000 من عرض ماله. It was narrated in an authentic Sahih hadith that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, 1 dirham surpassed 100,000 dirhams. So it was said to the Prophet, "How is that, O Messenger of Allah?" So he said, "A man had only 2 dirhams, meaning he didn't own more than these 2. And so he gave one of them in charity for the sake of Allah. And another man had a lot of money, and he gave 100,000 dirhams in charity." This is narrated by An-Nasa'i. So since this man did not own any money except those 2 dirhams, he gave one of them in charity, seeking the reward from Allah. That is, he gave half of his wealth. And so the reward of this 1 dirham given for the sake of Allah was greater than the reward of the wealthy man who gave 100,000 dirhams in charity, which in comparison to all of the money he owned was a small amount. Subhanallah, this is truly something for one to ponder into. Aboo Dharr radiyallahu anhu said, "And he advised me to keep ties with my relatives even if they severed them." The meaning is that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam also advised him to keep ties with his relatives even if his relatives cut ties with him. Ar-Rahim is the relative, even if the relative does not appreciate the good treatment that one shows them. If his relative treats him badly, then he should still be good towards him, and he should not stop showing good treatment to him, and by that, his reward would be great to Allah. That is because Allah approves for a Muslim to treat well both the one who treats him well and the one who does not treat him well. So the one who shows good treatment to his rahim, his relative, who treats him well, they would have a less reward than the one who shows good treatment to his relative who does not treat him well. This is because the latter contains breaking oneself in obedience to Allah, and Allah the Exalted accepts that. So whoever goes against himself and shows good treatment to his relatives that cut ties with him, then he will have a great reward. Aboo Dharr radiyallahu anhu said, "And he advised me to say the truth even if it was bitter." This means that the believer should say the truth in front of those who welcome it and those who don't. One should not be shy to say the truth, even in front of his own favorite sheikh or teacher, or in front of their parent or anyone else with authority. One should always say the truth and rely on Allah. Then Aboo Dharr radiyallahu anhu said, "And he advised me to say Laa Hawla walaa Quwwata illaa Billaah a lot. It was narrated from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam that this statement, Laa Hawla walaa Quwwata illaa Billaah, entails a great reward and a great benefit. As for the reward, it was mentioned in an authentic Sahih hadith that this statement is a treasure under the Arsh. That is, it is something that carries a great reward, a reward that Allah the Exalted saves for the hereafter for the believer who says it. This reward is preserved under the Arsh. As for its benefits, it gets rid of al-ham, the worries. So if a person was afflicted with worry, this is amongst the best of what he or she should say. It also aids the one afflicted with waswas, such that he finds eerie emptiness and hopelessness within himself and severe discontentment to the point that it's about to drive him insane. This statement will benefit him by the will of Allah. If he remains consistent in saying Laa Hawla walaa Quwwata illaa Billaah, he must see relief, meaning it is guaranteed, and his hardship will become easy. Allah the Exalted created an immense secret and a great benefit in saying this honorable statement. And so, relief from worries is just one, and in fact, the least in severity of the dozens of ailments that this honorable statement cures by the will of Allah. As for its meaning, it is tawheed, monotheism, meaning it contains elements of the honorable belief, and it is that no one has the power to do good or to obey except by the help of Allah, and no one can evade from sinning except by the protection of Allah. That is the meaning of Laa Hawla walaa Quwwata illaa Billaah. And so, no matter how active and energetic a person is in doing the good deeds, this energy and activity is an endowment from Allah. So let him or her thank Allah the Exalted. Whoever Allah facilitated good for, then let them thank Allah, and let them not be taken by pride in themselves. Rather, they look at the fact that Allah is the one who willed for them to do these good deeds. Had it not been for the will of Allah, the person would not have been able to do those good deeds. If the slave acknowledges and realizes that this good that he is doing is by the will of Allah, then he will be distanced from insincerity, and he will be close to the state of the sincere people. This is because the one who does the good deeds with a sincere intention for the sake of Allah, without having any insincerity in that, then Allah Ta'ala rewards the little that is done for His sake with a lot. That man who gave 1 dirham for Allah's sake, had it not been for his strong certitude and sincerity for Allah's sake, he would not have given it away, especially being that it was half of what he owned. And Allah Ta'ala made the reward of giving that 1 dirham more than the reward of the other one who gave 100,000 dirhams. So the reward of the deed being great depends on how complete and how perfect one's deed is carried out. The basis of sincerity is how complete and how perfect one's intention is. That is why the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam aggrandized the matter of the intention. And so he said, لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَّا نَوَى. Every person will have what he intended. The little done with sincerity is better to Allah than a lot that is done without sincerity. The hadith of Aboo Dharr contains rectifying the selves in such a way that it encourages people to love the poor and encourages one to be in their company and sit with them in the gatherings. Likewise, the Messenger of Allah loved being with the humble people in this life and to be gathered with them in the hereafter. In fact, he asked Allah the Exalted to gather him with the humble people, because on the Day of Judgment, Allah will gather the arrogant people while they have been reduced to the size of small red ants with the shape of tiny, degraded humans. Ahlullah, the pious people, they do not love the arrogant ones. Rather, they love to be amongst the humble believers, those whose hearts are broken for the sake of Allah. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, Allahumma ahyini miskina wa amitni miskina wahshurni fi zumratil masakin. O Allah, keep me humble while I am alive, and grant me death as a humble person, and on Judgment Day assemble me with the group of humble people. This is narrated by الحق, البيهقي, and 𝗕𝗲𝗃𝗃. The humble person is the one who is not arrogant, even if he was wealthy. He does not look down at the poor people, and he does not degrade them or make fun of them. This is the one whom the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked Allah to make him amongst. And that is because the prophets look at all the slaves of Allah as being under the destining of Allah. And so, neither the weak nor the strong would encounter anything but what Allah willed for them. Take the example of the children of a single man and woman. One child of theirs becomes energetic and strong, and another comes out weak and mentally challenged. Why is that? This is because Allah is the one who controls his slaves according to his will. Both the prophets and the awliya, the highly righteous Muslims, they know that every human would be under the control of Allah. So if they see an energetic, intelligent human, then they know that this is only because Allah the Exalted specified that person with this. And the ones whose situation is the opposite of that, then the prophets and the awliya know that Allah is the one who willed for them to have those attributes. All the humans are from the offspring of Prophet Adam alayhi salam. And despite that, look at their many different deeds and states. No one knows the count of all of that except Allah. So we ask Allah the Exalted to beautify us with the good traits and to grant us the good situations. Allahumma ameen, walhamdulillah, wallahu a'lam.